If you're praying for your son's protection, strength, and courage, take a moment and join this prayer. Don't scroll, please don't scroll, listen to this. Because if you are hearing these words right now, this message is not an accident, it is not random, and it is not late. It is Tuesday, January 13th, 2026, and something far greater than timing or algorithms guided you here on purpose. Because your heart needs this moment more than you realize, and somewhere deep inside you already felt it before I even said it out loud. That quiet tug, that sudden pause, that feeling that made you stop and listen, because this message is for you and for your son. And the love you carry for him is so strong that it echoes beyond words, beyond distance, beyond what you can control. And I need you to hear this clearly right now. Your prayers have been heard, every whispered request, every silent tear, every moment you stayed strong on the outside while worrying on the inside. Every time you looked at his face or thought about him and wondered if he was truly protected in a world that feels heavier and louder than it used to be. And listen closely, because what you thought were delays, setbacks, closed doors, or confusing seasons in his life were not punishments. They were not failures. And they were not signs that something was wrong. They were divine interventions, quiet acts of protection happening behind the scenes, moments where God stepped in and said, "Not yet, not this path, not this person, not this situation." Because there were battles your son never had to fight, dangers he never had to see, and pain he was quietly spared from. And even when you felt helpless, even when you felt like all you could do was pray and hope, heaven was already moving, angels were already surrounding him, and signs have been appearing around you lately whether you notice them or not. Repeating numbers like 1111 showing up at unexpected times, 333 when your thoughts drift toward him, 555 when you're wondering if things will ever change. Those are not coincidences, those are reminders that something greater is actively working in his life, strengthening him from the inside out. Because your son is going through a spiritual awakening, even if he doesn't fully understand it yet, even if he hasn't found the words for it. Something is shifting in his spirit, building courage where fear once lived, building resilience where doubt once lingered, and shaping him into someone stronger than his circumstances. And you may have noticed that lately he seems quieter, more thoughtful, or maybe more restless than usual. And that's because transformation doesn't always look peaceful while it's happening. But hear this. He is not lost, he is being prepared. And right now I speak protection over his mind, over his heart, over his body, and over his future. I declare that confusion has no authority over him, fear has no permanent place in his life, and no weapon formed against him will prosper. Because wherever he walks, peace walks with him. Wherever he goes, courage rises within him. And even when he feels uncertain or unsure, there is an unseen guidance directing his steps toward the path he was always meant to walk. And listen carefully, because your love reaches him more deeply than you realize, even if he doesn't always say it, even if words feel limited, even if distance exists, your prayers meet him in moments he never talks about, moments when he feels alone, moments when he questions himself, moments when he wonders if he's strong enough. And that's why you may have felt emotional lately without a clear reason, why your heart suddenly feels heavy and hopeful at the same time. Your spirit recognizes that something is shifting, that a new chapter is beginning, and that this season, as uncomfortable as it has been, is not meant to break him but to shape him. And I need you to trust this part, because destiny often unfolds quietly before it becomes visible, and your son's story is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning, and there are connections forming in his life that will uplift him. People who will see his heart and not misuse it, opportunities that will align with who he truly is rather than who the world tried to make him become. And if you've been praying for clarity, for strength, for reassurance, Let this be your confirmation that you are not praying into emptiness, you are praying into movement, into alignment, into protection, and I want you to stay with this feeling. Don't rush away from it, because there is still more unfolding after today. Watch for the signs. Pay attention to the peace that follows this message. Notice how your heart feels. Lighter even as the world stays the same, because that is the universe, that is God, reminding you that your son is covered, guarded, and divinely protected, and no matter what comes next, he will not face it alone, and neither will you. Don't scroll, stay right here, because if you're still listening, it's not by chance, it's because this message is continuing for you and for your son, and something powerful is unfolding right now as these words reach you, and I need you to understand this deeply. What has been happening beneath the surface of his life is far more significant than what you've been able to see on the outside, because while you may have been focusing on outcomes, timelines, and visible progress, heaven has been working on his foundation, strengthening what cannot be shaken, correcting what needed healing, and removing what could not come with him into the next season. And this is why things may have felt slow, delayed, or confusing. Why progress didn't look the way you imagined it would. Why certain plans dissolved without explanation. Because your son was being shielded from paths that would have cost him his peace, his confidence, or his sense of self. And listen closely, because the universe does not interrupt lives without purpose, and God does not delay destinies without reason. And right now, there is a recalibration happening in his spirit. A quiet but powerful alignment that is setting him up for a breakthrough that will make sense only in hindsight. And you may have noticed subtle changes, his questions becoming deeper, his silence becoming heavier, his emotions surfacing in unexpected ways. And that is not weakness, that is awakening, because when a soul begins to outgrow old versions of itself, it enters a phase where nothing quite fits anymore, not old habits, not old relationships, not old expectations, and that discomfort is not meant to scare you. It is meant to signal growth, and I need you to hear this part clearly. Your son is being prepared to step into a version of himself that requires courage he didn't know he had yet, strength that couldn't be built in comfort, and wisdom that only comes from walking through uncertainty and choosing faith anyway. And right now I speak peace into the moments where your mind runs ahead of your heart, into the nights when you wonder if he's okay when you can't hear his voice, into the times when you replay conversations and wish you could protect him from every pain life brings. Because love like yours is powerful, but it was never meant to carry fear with it. And God is asking you in this season to trade worry for trust, not because your concern isn't valid, but because your prayers have already opened doors that fear cannot close, and there are signs surrounding you confirming this alignment. Psalms that play at the exact moment you think of him, numbers repeating when your heart feels restless. A sudden sense of calm that washes over you without explanation. These are not random, they are reminders that you are not alone in this journey, that angels are actively guarding his steps, redirecting his path, and placing protection around him even when he doesn't realize it. And listen carefully, because there is also healing happening in him right now, healing from disappointments he never fully expressed, from pressures he felt he had to carry silently, from expectations he didn't know how to meet. And as that healing unfolds, his confidence will rise, his voice will strengthen, and his ability to stand firm in who he is will grow. And you may soon notice him making choices that surprise you, setting boundaries he never set before, walking away from environments that once drained him, and choosing himself in ways that look unfamiliar. But that is not distance, that is maturity. And I need you to trust that this evolution is guided, not reckless, intentional, not random. And as this season shifts, new connections will enter his life. People aligned with his growth rather than his past, mentors, friends, and influences who see his potential and encourage his purpose rather than compete with it. And if you've been praying for the right people to surround him, let this be your confirmation that those prayers are already in motion. And hear this too. Love is not absent from his future, despite any disappointments or heartbreaks he may have experienced, because there is a connection being prepared that will meet him at the right time, not as a distraction but as a support, not as a lesson but as a partnership. And that connection will come when he is ready to receive it fully, when he understands his worth, when he knows his value, and when he no longer confuses attachment with love. And that timing is intentional, because rushing love before healing only repeats cycles, and God is breaking cycles in his life right now, cycles of self-doubt, cycles of overthinking, cycles of carrying burdens that were never his to carry. And I need you to stay present with this message, because something is still unfolding even as you listen, and the peace you feel right now is not imagined. It is a sign that alignment is happening, that reassurance is being poured into your spirit, and that this season, as challenging as it has been, is giving way to clarity, strength, and forward movement. And I want you to hold on to this truth. Your son is not behind, he is not failing, and he is not forgotten. He is right on time, protected in ways you cannot always see, guided in moments you cannot always reach, and becoming someone who will look back one day and realize that everything he walked through was shaping him for something greater. And this message is your reminder to breathe, to release what you cannot control, and to trust that what is being built right now is far stronger than anything that was taken away. Don't scroll. Stay right here, because if you're still listening at this point, it means your spirit is already leaning in, already sensing that this message is unfolding layer by layer just for you, and especially for your son. And I need you to understand something crucial right now. There is a turning point approaching, not loudly, not dramatically at first, but quietly, the way the most powerful shifts always begin. Because what's happening in his life right now is not about survival anymore, it's about activation. And that's why the pressure has felt different, heavier yet purposeful, uncomfortable yet clarifying. Because seasons of activation stretch you before they elevate you. And your son is standing at the edge of a breakthrough that required everything he's already walked through to prepare him. Every delay that tested his patience, every disappointment that taught him discernment, every lonely moment that forced him to discover strength within himself rather than seek validation outside. And listen carefully, because heaven does not promote people who are not anchored, and your son is becoming anchored, rooted in truth, grounded in resilience, and strengthened in ways that won't collapse under pressure. And this is why certain patterns have been breaking lately, why habits he once tolerated no longer feel right, why conversations that once felt normal now feel draining, why environments that once felt familiar now feel restrictive. Because when destiny begins to activate, misalignment becomes uncomfortable by design. And I know you've felt the tension of this shift as well, the moments where you want to step in, to fix, to protect, to smooth the path for him. But I need you to hear this. Intervention from above is already happening, and it's more precise than anything you could orchestrate, because what's unfolding is not just about his circumstances changing, it's about his identity solidifying. And identity must be built internally before success can be sustained externally. And right now courage is rising in him in subtle ways, not the loud kind that seeks attention, but the steady kind that allows someone to say no without guilt, to walk away without explanation, to stand alone without fear. And this is important, because the next chapter of his life will require him to trust himself, to make decisions without constant reassurance, and to move forward even when outcomes aren't guaranteed. And hear this clearly. He is being equipped for that season now, and you may notice moments where he seems more decisive, even if imperfect, more honest about his feelings, even if uncomfortable, more willing to face truth rather than avoid it. And that is growth, not rebellion, strength, not distance. And I want to speak directly to the worry that still lingers in your heart, the quiet fear that asks, what if he makes mistakes? Because listen, mistakes made while aligned are lessons, not losses, and your son is learning how to listen to his inner guidance, how to recognize red flags before they become regrets, how to sense when something is off even if it looks good on the surface. And this discernment is a gift, one that will protect him long after this season passes. And there are confirmations appearing around you that this activation is real, unexpected clarity, moments of peace that arrive without explanation. Signs like 222 when you're thinking about balance, 44 when protection is near, 111 when new beginnings are being unlocked. These are not coincidences, they are checkpoints along the path, reminders that alignment is taking place step by step, and I need you to stay present with this message, because something is shifting even as you listen. And that shift involves purpose, because your son is not just being prepared to succeed, he's being prepared to contribute, to lead in ways that don't rely on authority but on integrity, to influence not through force but through example, and that kind of calling requires depth, empathy, and self-awareness, qualities that cannot be rushed or manufactured. And this is why his journey has unfolded the way it has, uniquely, sometimes painfully, but always purposefully. And hear this. There is a moment coming when things will begin to move faster, when clarity will replace confusion, when opportunities will align more naturally, when doors will open without him having to force them. And when that happens, it will be tempting to forget the quiet work that prepared him for it. But this season will be the reason he doesn't lose himself when momentum builds. And I want to speak protection over that future now. Declaring that success will not harden his heart, that recognition will not inflate his ego, that responsibility will not overwhelm his spirit, because humility and strength are being balanced within him right now, and that balance is sacred. And I also need you to hear this part, because it matters deeply. Your role in this season is not to carry the weight of the outcome, but to remain a place of peace, a source of grounding, a reminder of unconditional love, because your calm reassures him more than constant advice ever could, and your faith speaks louder than fear ever will. And if you felt called to step back slightly, to trust more deeply, to release control even when it's uncomfortable, that calling is intentional. Because sometimes the greatest protection comes not from holding tighter, but from believing stronger. And listen closely, because this activation does not end with him. It ripples outward, affecting future relationships, future choices, future generations. And that's why the preparation has been thorough. And I want you to sit with this truth for a moment. Nothing about his journey has been wasted. Not one tear, not one setback, not one confusing detour. Because all of it has been aligning him with the version of himself that can carry what's coming next. And that version is closer now than it has ever been. And as this part of the message closes, I want you to pay attention to how your body feels, how your breath has slowed, how your heart feels steadier. Because that piece is confirmation, and it's telling you that the process is working, the timing is right, and what is being activated now will soon become visible. And when it does, you'll recognize it, not as luck, not as coincidence, but as fulfillment unfolding exactly when it was meant to. Don't scroll, stay with this. Because this part of the message is touching something deeper than circumstances, deeper than protection or preparation. It's touching the heart space where love, connection, and destiny quietly intersect. And I need you to understand this clearly right now. Your son's journey is not only about strength and courage, it's also about learning how to love without losing himself, how to connect without abandoning his truth, and how to open his heart without repeating the wounds of the past. Because love is one of the greatest teachers in any soul's journey, and that's why it has been handled so carefully in his life. why some connections didn't last. Why certain people drifted away even when he cared deeply. Why moments that felt promising suddenly fell apart. And I know that was hard to watch, because when you love someone, you want their heart to be safe. You want them to experience joy without pain. But listen closely. Those endings were not punishments, they were protection, because not every connection that feels intense is meant to be permanent, and not every attachment that feels familiar is aligned. And right now, something important is shifting in his emotional world, something that's preparing him for a connection that won't drain him, confuse him, or cost him his peace, but will instead meet him at the level he's growing into. And this is why timing has mattered so much, because soul aligned. Connections don't arrive when we're lonely, they arrive when we're ready. And readiness doesn't mean perfection, it means self-awareness, boundaries, and the courage to be honest about what we need and what we will no longer accept. And your son is reaching that place now, slowly but surely, learning to recognize the difference between chemistry and compatibility, between attention and intention, between attachment and love. And this discernment is sacred, because it protects his heart while still allowing it to remain open. And I want you to hear this. There is a connection being prepared for him that will not rush him, not pressure him, not confuse him, but will feel calm, steady, and grounding. A connection that doesn't trigger anxiety but creates peace. One that doesn't demand performance but encourages authenticity. And when that connection enters his life, it will feel different, not dramatic in a chaotic way, but familiar in a soul-recognizing way. Like two paths finally crossing at the right time. And this is important, because the universe does not bring soul connections into unfinished chapters. It brings them when lessons have been integrated, when cycles have been closed, and when the heart has learned how to love wisely. And right now, even if he doesn't realize it consciously, your son is closing cycles, releasing old emotional patterns, letting go of versions of love that required him to shrink, overgive, or prove his worth. And that release can feel lonely at times. It can feel like emptiness before fullness arrives. But emptiness is not absence, it is space being made. And that space is intentional, because something aligned needs room to enter. And you may have noticed that lately he's more selective with his energy, more guarded with his emotions, or more reflective about what he wants. And that's not fear, that's wisdom forming. And I want to speak peace over your heart as well. Because sometimes as a parent or guardian, watching this emotional evolution can feel unsettling, like you're unsure whether to step in or step back. But trust this. Your son's heart is being guided, not hardened, protected, not closed. And the love meant for him will not bypass the work he's done, it will honor it. And when that connection arrives, it will not distract him from his purpose, it will support it, not pull him away from his path, but walk alongside him on it. And this matters, because love that aligns with destiny multiplies strength rather than dividing focus. And hear this clearly. There is no rush in divine timing. What arrives too early often leaves too soon. But what arrives at the right moment tends to stay. And the delays you questioned were preventing premature attachments that would have cost him clarity later. And I need you to trust that the same force that has protected his steps is also guarding his heart, ensuring that when he opens it fully, it will be met with respect, safety, and mutual growth. And there are signs already hinting at this alignment. Dreams that feel vivid, thoughts of the future that suddenly feel hopeful rather than uncertain, moments where he imagines connection without fear. And these are signals that his heart is healing and expanding. And I want you to stay present with this feeling, because love is not absent from his life. It is approaching in the right form, at the right pace, with the right intention. And as this part of the message unfolds, I want you to release any lingering fear that his journey will be lonely or incomplete, because it will not be. His story includes connection, companionship, and shared purpose, but it also includes self-respect, balance, and emotional safety, and those foundations are being laid right now, quietly, intentionally, divinely. And the peace you feel as you hear this is not imagined. It is confirmation that alignment is happening, that timing is working in His favor, and that love, when it arrives, will feel less like chaos and more like coming home. Don't scroll. Stay here just a little longer, because this part of the message is where everything begins to soften, where the tension you've been carrying slowly releases, and where gratitude, surrender, and deep emotional healing begin to settle into your spirit. And I need you to hear this gently but clearly. What you and your son have walked through was never meant to leave you hardened, exhausted, or defeated. It was meant to teach you how to trust even when answers were delayed, how to love without control, and how to believe without needing constant proof. Because faith matures most in the seasons where clarity is thin but hope refuses to disappear. And right now, there is an invitation being extended to you to let go of the weight you've been holding for so long, the invisible responsibility you placed on yourself to make sure everything turns out okay, the habit of bracing for what could go wrong instead of allowing yourself to believe in what could go right. And listen closely, because gratitude is not denial of hardship, it is recognition of survival. And you have survived moments that once felt unbearable, nights where sleep didn't come easily, days where you smiled for others while carrying worry quietly inside. And yet here you are, still standing, still loving, still believing, and that alone is evidence of strength you didn't know you had. And I want you to begin acknowledging that strength, not as something you force yourself into, but as something that emerged naturally because you had no other choice. And your son has witnessed that resilience even when you didn't realize it, because children learn courage not from speeches, but from watching someone keep going without losing their compassion. And right now, there is healing happening in both of you. A mutual release of expectations that no longer serve the relationship. A softening of old fears that once dictated reactions, and a quiet understanding forming that love does not require constant fixing to remain powerful. And this is important, because gratitude shifts perspective. It allows you to look back without bitterness and forward without fear. And I want you to take a moment, even as you listen, to thank yourself for staying present, for choosing patience when impatience felt easier, for choosing prayer when panic felt louder, for choosing hope even when outcomes were uncertain, because those choices mattered more than you know, and they shaped the environment your son has been growing in, an environment rooted not in perfection, but in perseverance. And hear this. Surrender does not mean giving up. It means giving back what was never meant to rest solely on your shoulders. And there is a peace that comes when you allow yourself to say, "I've done my part, now I trust the rest." And that peace is available to you right now, settling in slowly, gently, replacing the tightness in your chest with a sense of calm that doesn't depend on circumstances changing overnight. And this is where emotional release begins, because holding on too tightly can exhaust even the strongest hearts, and you were never meant to carry constant vigilance, constant anticipation, constant worry, because love flourishes best in spaces where trust is allowed to breathe. And I need you to know that letting go of fear does not make you careless, it makes you free, and freedom allows joy to return, laughter to feel natural again, hope to feel light instead of heavy. And your son feels this shift even if it hasn't been spoken aloud, because energy changes are sensed before they are explained, and as you begin to release, he begins to rise, not because you pushed him, but because you trusted him, and that trust becomes a mirror in which he learns to trust himself. And this season is teaching both of you that control was never the source of safety. Connection was, faith was, alignment was, and gratitude anchors all of it, because when you choose gratitude, you choose to honor what has been built rather than fixating on what hasn't arrived yet. and there are blessings already present that once felt distant, moments of calm that once felt impossible, clarity that once felt out of reach. And I want you to recognize those moments, not rush past them, not minimize them, but let them register fully, because peace compounds when acknowledged. And right now, there is a deep emotional exhale happening, a permission to rest emotionally without guilt, a reminder that vigilance is not the same as love, and exhaustion is not the same as devotion, and you are allowed to feel good again without fearing that something bad will follow. Because joy is not a warning sign, it is a sign of alignment, and as gratitude settles in, it creates space for trust to deepen, trust in timing, trust in process, trust in the unseen support that has been present all along, and that trust does something powerful. It quiets the mind and strengthens the heart, and in that quiet strength, intuition becomes clearer, reactions soften, and decisions feel less forced, and this shift prepares you for the next chapter, not with anxiety, but with steadiness, because the work you've done internally is now catching up externally, and you don't have to rush what's unfolding, you don't have to chase reassurance, you don't have to prove faith by suffering, because faith is also demonstrated by peace, and I want you to sit with this truth for a moment. Everything you needed to survive this season, you already had within you, and everything you need for the next season is already being prepared for you. And that realization changes how you move forward, because now you're not waiting for permission to feel hopeful, you're allowing it naturally. And that is healing in its purest form. And as this part of the message draws to a close, notice how your breathing feels steadier, how your thoughts feel less rushed, how your heart feels more open. Because that is gratitude doing its quiet work, and it is preparing you for what comes next, not with fear, but with trust, not with tension, but with peace, not with exhaustion, but with renewed strength. Don't scroll, stay right here until the end, because this final part is where everything comes together, where the journey you've been listening to is gently sealed, not with noise or urgency, but with a deep, settling peace that reaches places words usually can't touch, and I need you to hear this clearly. What you felt while listening was real, the calm that slowly replaced tension, the quiet reassurance that wrapped around your heart, the sense that something invisible yet powerful was standing guard over you and your son, because this moment was never just about listening, it was about alignment, about receiving what had already been prepared for you. And right now, I speak a covering over your son, a covering that extends beyond what you can physically see or control, a protection that surrounds his mind when thoughts feel heavy, his heart when emotions feel uncertain, and his path when choices feel unclear. And I declare that wherever he goes from this day forward, he does not walk alone. He is accompanied by guidance, by wisdom, by strength that rises when he needs it most, even when he doesn't consciously ask for it. And hear this: there are battles he will never have to fight because they have already been handled, distractions that will lose their grip before they ever gain momentum, and doors that will open at just the right time without him having to force them, because his life is being ordered with intention, not chaos. And I want you to release any remaining fear right now, the kind that lingers quietly even after reassurance, because fear has no authority here. It does not get the final word, and it does not get to live rent-free in your heart anymore, because love has already taken its place, and love, when paired with trust, becomes unshakable. And I want you to know that your role in his life remains powerful even as it evolves, not through control, not through constant worry, but through belief, through presence, through the quiet confidence that says, I trust what is unfolding even when I can't see every step. And that trust sends a signal into the universe, into his spirit, into the very fabric of what's coming next. And that signal is strength. And hear this prophetic truth: what is ahead for your son will not erase what he's been through, but it will make sense of it, It will contextualize the delays, the detours, the emotional growth, the moments where nothing seemed to be happening yet everything was changing. And one day, sooner than you expect, there will be a moment where you look at him and realize that something has shifted permanently, not in a dramatic way, but in a grounded, steady, unmistakable way, and you'll see confidence where uncertainty once lived, clarity where confusion once lingered, and peace where restlessness once stirred. And that moment will not feel rushed or forced, it will feel earned, aligned, and right on time. And I want you to stay open to the signs that will follow this message, because they will come gently. A conversation that reassures you, a quiet thought that settles your heart, a repeated number that feels familiar, a sense of calm that returns when worry tries to rise. And these signs are not meant to overwhelm you, they are meant to remind you that you are supported, that this path is guided, and that nothing important is being missed. And as this prayer seals, I declare that your home is filled with peace, that your heart is no longer braced for loss but open to trust, that your nights become calmer and your mornings lighter, because rest is not a luxury, it is part of faith, and you are allowed to rest now. Emotionally, spiritually, mentally, without guilt, without fear that something will fall apart if you do, because what is meant to be held together by force was never meant to last. And what is held together by alignment does not require constant vigilance. And hear this final truth. Your son's life is not fragile, it is fortified, strengthened by everything he has walked through and everything he has learned. And your love has been a constant anchor through it all, not perfect, not effortless, but sincere. And sincerity carries more power than perfection ever could. And as this message comes to a close, I want you to take a slow breath and allow yourself to feel what remains after the words fade, because that feeling, quiet, steady, grounded, is not emptiness, it is peace settling in, it is confirmation that what needed to reach you has reached you, and that the next chapter does not require anxiety to begin, it only requires trust, and trust is already present, stronger than you think, and from this moment forward, whenever doubt tries to return, remember this. You were guided here for a reason. This message met you exactly where you are, and what has been sealed cannot be undone, because protection surrounds your son, peace surrounds you, and the path ahead is unfolding with purpose, clarity, and divine timing, exactly as it should. If this prayer touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe, so we can continue praying together for our children. May God watch over your son today and always. Amen.